Feynman advised students, do not touch this for 3 hours before bedtime. Powerful brain recovery. Richard Feynman was no ordinary physicist. Renowned for his Nobel Prize-winning work in quantum electrodynamics, he was also a prankster, a skilled bongo drummer, and an unrepentant question-asker. His teaching style often bordered on the theatrical, infusing complex scientific concepts with stories, humor, and everyday examples. Yet behind that buoyant public persona lay a man who was intensely serious about the processes by which humans learn, rest, and innovate. In lecture halls and casual chats with students, Feynman emphasized that our most prized asset in scientific inquiry isn't a cutting-edge lab, but a well-rested, agile mind. And one key to preserving that mental agility, he famously told his students, was something deceptively simple. Avoid this for at least 3 hours before going to bed. Feynman delivered that advice often enough to embed it in campus lore. Some recall how, during coffee breaks at the California Institute of Technology, he would chat with undergraduates about test anxiety or the challenges of late-night study marathons. He sometimes joked that students spent more time trying to appear busy than actually learning. But when asked what single change they could make to perform better academically and keep their brains sharp for the next big insight, he hinted they should impose a strict cutoff on a certain bedtime habit. His reasoning was grounded in his own experiences as a night owl. Feynman's personal schedule was famously erratic. He would stay up long hours entertaining ideas or scribbling equations on notepads. Yet, he had a method to the madness. He knew that after a certain hour, continuing to overload the mind with a specific kind of stimulation could hamper the restorative processes that occur during sleep. In effect, we sabotage the brain's ability to recover. If we want to be fresh for the next day's challenges, he'd say, we mustn't let ourselves be tricked into thinking the mind can handle incessant input. But what was this that Feynman insisted we not touch for 3 hours before bedtime? That question elicited all sorts of guesses from those who overheard him. Some thought he referred to coffee or sugary snacks, given how he occasionally joked about the jitters. Others suspected he meant scientific papers or any kind of reading that might overstimulate the mind. A few swore he was talking about bright lights or noisy parties, while some insisted it had to do with the fast-emerging realm of television or electronics. In reality, the deeper principle behind Feynman's caution was broader than any single item. Feynman believed that the human brain, though resilient, is also easily tricked into continuous engagement. He had noticed how many students stayed up late, either cramming from textbooks, flipping through problem sets, or unwinding with newfangled electronic distractions, shows, or rowdy social gatherings. He was not against socializing or studying, but he noticed a pattern. Those who kept their brains on full throttle, right up until they switched off the light, often had trouble truly unwinding, which cut into their quality of sleep. Once you skip on that deep rest, he believed, you rob your brain of the chance to consolidate memories, interpret the day's experiences, and perform mental housekeeping. The result might be mental fog the next day, slowed problem solving, or diminished creativity. And if you repeat this pattern nightly, you create a cycle that slowly erodes your sharpness. Feynman knew from personal experience how crucial mental clarity was to tackling tough questions in quantum mechanics or particle physics. He first articulated this idea in letters to friends, though it was often overshadowed by more provocative quotes about cargo cult science or stories of him picking locks at the Los Alamos labs. Still, those who read his private correspondence noted that Feynman took rest seriously. He would confide how intense mental concentration gave him a rush of excitement, but that excitement could persist in his mind like a reverberating echo if he didn't create a buffer period before sleep. Feynman recalled nights in which, after feverishly working on advanced integrals or conceptual puzzles, he attempted to slip directly into bed. He often lay awake for an hour or more, mind churning. In the morning, he felt half-fried, as though he had slept but never turned off the mental motor. Over time, he came to see that it wasn't just about the quantity of hours in bed, but the quality of mental disengagement leading into those hours. Hence, do not touch this for 3 hours before bedtime. He made the principles sound playful or cryptic, but it boiled down to one essential guideline: reduce intense brain-activating stimuli. That might be complicated problem sets or emotionally charged discussions. It might be bright screens that keep the brain's alertness circuits on high. Or it might be the overconsumption of media, like devouring an entire new series or playing high-stakes video games just moments before attempting to sleep. At first, some students scoffed. They insisted they studied best under pressure, right up until turning off the lights. Others said they needed to watch a show or chat incessantly on the phone to unwind. But Feynman would gently push back, reminding them that unwinding isn't the same as quieting your mind. If the content is stimulating, be it emotional, intellectual, or sensory, your neurons might remain in a heightened state, delaying the transition into deeper sleep stages. You might wonder, how does this align with Feynman's more famous pieces of advice? Like, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you're the easiest person to fool, or his championing of childlike curiosity. In truth, this bedtime rule fits perfectly within his broader philosophy of mental honesty. If we claim we can handle 24/7 stimulation, we might be fooling ourselves about the toll it takes. Our bodies and brains have evolved with circadian rhythms and require a lull, a gradual slope into restfulness. Here is a thought experiment, one that resonates with Feynman's approach. Ask yourself, when was the last time you gave your mind a gentle 2 or 3 hour runway before bed, free from screens, loud noises, or complicated tasks? Did you notice the difference the next morning in how quickly you could think or how creative you felt? If you have never tried it, consider doing so for a few nights and record your observations. Feel free to mention in the comments what you discover. Back in the day, many of Feynman's students were too dazzled by his legendary lectures on quantum mechanics to notice that he was also an informal guru on mental well-being. However, a few took his words to heart and found that, indeed, pulling back from intense study or media consumption a couple of hours before bed yielded a surprising clarity the next morning. One anecdote from a Caltech undergraduate in the mid-1960s tells of how he was struggling with an advanced physics problem on frictionless surfaces. He hammered away at it until midnight every day, then collapsed into bed. Over the course of weeks, his progress stagnated, and he began doubting his aptitude. Eventually, he confided in Feynman, who asked about his sleep habits. Upon learning that the student studied right up until lights out, Feynman recommended the 3-hour rule. The student complied, at first begrudgingly, and used the final hours before bed to engage in simpler, more relaxing activities, tidying his room, strolling outside, or reading something lighthearted. Within a few days, the solution to the problem emerged, almost as if it had been waiting in the wings for the mental clutter to clear. This phenomenon made sense to Feynman. He often said that the mind, especially the subconscious, needs a quiet stage to piece together random insights, analogous to how a quiet moment can bring an aha realization after hours of frustrated effort. By constantly bombarding the brain with new data, especially data that triggers emotional or intellectual excitement, you never give your deeper mental processes the quiet they need to weave connections. Interestingly, Feynman wasn't a health professional or a neuroscientist, yet he had an intuitive sense of what modern sleep research confirms. Bright lights, stimulating content, and heavy mental tasks close to bedtime can delay the release of melatonin and prolong the onset of deeper sleep stages like slow-wave sleep. The result? A compromised memory consolidation process and potentially restless nights. But as with much of Feynman's advice, it was never purely dogmatic. He recognized that some nights demanded last-minute cramming. Life was unpredictable, but he believed that if on average we set a boundary, no intense problem sets, no heavy debates, no bright screens in those final hours, our brains would thank us with improved clarity. Think of your mind as an instrument, he'd say, one that needs tuning, not just playing all the time. Another question might arise. How did Feynman himself unwind before bed, especially given his notorious love for puzzling concepts? According to a few close friends, he often pivoted to more playful or relaxing activities in the late evening. He might tinker with small mechanical projects, doodle irreverent sketches, or jam on his bongos in a laid-back tempo. These hobbies, though still creative, differed from the intense mental strain of cutting-edge physics. He called them refreshing amusements, a way to keep the mind engaged but not overstimulated. Occasionally, he would read light fiction or comedic pieces, letting himself laugh and drift into a more carefree mental space. He rarely delved into intense scientific texts after a certain hour. If he felt a burning idea or equation welling up, he might jot down a quick note, just enough to revisit it the next morning. But he refrained from diving deep. That was the line he drew, the line he recommended to his students. Now, here is a pivotal question for you, dear reader. Can you identify a habit that you indulge in late at night? Perhaps scrolling through social media, gaming, reading stressful news, or wrestling with elaborate projects that may be hindering your sleep quality and next-day mental performance? Reflect on the potential gains from applying Feynman's 3-hour rule. Imagine the difference in your ability to tackle problems or engage your creativity if your brain were consistently well-rested. Would it be worth the experiment? This quiet advice from Feynman was overshadowed by more flamboyant stories from his life, like cracking safes at Los Alamos, giving playful lectures about magnetism, or making wisecracks in international science forums. Journalists seldom fixated on the 3-hour rule because it wasn't as headline-grabbing as a quantum puzzle or a mischief anecdote. But to the students who heeded it, the difference was monumental. Over time, as alumni from Caltech and other institutions recalled their interactions with Feynman, many have stated that while his big idea teachings shaped their intellectual horizons, it was these practical tips, like how to guard your brain's downtime, that made the daily difference. They credited better academic performance and even improved mental health to the simple shift of turning off intense input well before bed. Now consider how this principle might apply in today's world. In Feynman's era, the biggest distraction might have been the radio, television, or perhaps an obsessive rereading of advanced textbooks. Today, we carry pocket-sized portals to infinite stimulation. Smartphones with social media apps, streaming platforms, endless news cycles, and addictive games. The potential for overstimulation is drastically higher. If Feynman believed a 1960s student could benefit from unplugging, how much more might we, living in the digital age, gain by stepping away from those screens in the hours before sleep? Modern neuroscience provides extra clarity. Blue light emitted from screens can suppress melatonin, the hormone that tells our bodies it's time to wind down. Moreover, the emotional triggers from online interactions, whether arguments in comment threads or the dopamine hits from likes, can keep stress hormones elevated. All these factors converge to disrupt restful sleep. Feynman's intuitive caution has proven prescient. That is not to say we must turn our evenings into barren stretches. Feynman himself found value in gentle amusements, things that were low-key, pleasurable, and not cognitively intense. For instance, one might play a light instrument, journal personal reflections, do stretches or mild physical exercise, or savor a conversation with family and friends about uplifting or non-stressful topics. The critical point is to keep the environment soothing enough for your mind to coast gracefully into sleep readiness. Curiously, the "do not touch this" refrain might differ from person to person. For some, it's definitely electronics. For others, it might be highly charged debates or emotionally demanding phone calls. The details matter less than the overarching truth that Feynman hammered home. The mind is an exquisite but sensitive tool. If you poke at it aggressively right up to bedtime, you hamper the very resource you rely on for next-day insight. If we examine Feynman's broader wisdom, we see that he was enthralled by the act of discovery, be it unearthing new truths in quantum mechanics or discovering creative ways to talk about science. He believed that imagination sets the scene, but reason verifies. That imagination requires a fresh mind, and reason demands the clarity that comes from quality rest. From that viewpoint, the bedtime rule was less about scolding students for lazy habits and more about enabling them to harness their mental powers at full throttle when it counted most, during learning, problem-solving, or research. Let us shift momentarily to one more reflective question. If you adopted Feynman's bedtime principle for a month, setting aside the last 3 hours before sleep as a calm zone with minimal screens and major stimuli, how do you think it could alter your performance at work, your relationships, or your general stress levels? Could it sharpen your problem solving, reduce irritability, or open up creative channels you've neglected? Feel free to imagine the outcomes or share your thoughts. In the final chapters of Feynman's life, he battled illness, yet he retained his trademark curiosity and humor. Even when he was hospitalized, he would crack jokes with nurses, scribble mathematical puzzles on scraps of paper, and occasionally hold small physics classes for visitors. But he also respected the boundaries of his waning energy. A nurse once recounted how Feynman politely declined reading new research papers past a certain hour, saying, "It's late, and I don't want to cheat my mind of its rest." In that moment, she saw not just a flamboyant scientist, but a man deeply in tune with the interplay between intense intellectual labor and the respite needed to sustain it. When he passed away in 1988, the world lost not only a brilliant mind, but also a man who dedicated himself to unveiling the joy and practicality of science. Amid the tributes describing him as the great explainer, the quantum magician, or the trickster theorist, we might find overlooked mentions of his quieter maxims, like the 3-hour rule for bedtime. Yet these lesser-known teachings remain profoundly relevant, especially in the throes of our hyper-connected digital age. So if you ever find yourself with a busy schedule, feeling drained, or sensing that your capacity for tackling complex tasks is diminishing, recall Feynman's gentle admonition. Resist the temptation to flood your final hours with bright screens, intense problem sets, or emotionally charged media. Let your mind coast. Listen to calming music, write in a journal, reflect on simpler tasks, or engage in light reading that doesn't provoke an adrenaline rush. And watch, over time, as your mental acuity bounces back, your morning clarity improves, and your creative spark reignites. We might sum it up with a final question. In a world that celebrates constant hustle, how much more powerful might you become if you honored your natural need for mental downtime? Could that, in fact, be your superpower, this quiet cultivation of a mind that's truly at rest when it's time to rest, so it can be truly alive when it's time to think? In the end, Feynman's "do not touch this for 3 hours before bedtime" stands as a simple yet transformative principle. He may never have published it in a formal paper nor scribbled it on the blackboards that he loved so dearly. But for those who heard him say it and had the courage to test it, the results spoke volumes. It was another manifestation of his overarching mantra. The best learning emerges when we respect reality and measure the consequences of our actions. We are, after all, not just curious brains floating in space, but biological creatures with rhythms that, if honored, can yield astonishing feats of intellect. And that is the subtle but powerful legacy of Feynman's bedtime wisdom. Ignore it, and you might find yourself perpetually tired, forever chasing a sense of clarity that remains elusive. Embrace it, and you might experience the very powerful brain recovery he predicted, a daily reset that nurtures creativity, problem-solving, and the unbridled curiosity that he championed throughout his life. In an era addicted to perpetual stimulus, those who remember Feynman's advice may just discover the hidden advantage of well-timed calm, and in doing so, glimpse the deeper wonder of living, awake and aware, on this planet of endless riddles.